Our interview this morning is with Ken Kelley. Ken was born at Morton, Texas in September of 1938. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve, then he went to the U.S. Navy, went to the U.S. Army, and he ended his time in the United States Air Force. His highest rank attained was E6 Tech Sergeant. This interview was conducted at Burleson, Texas on Friday, August the 3rd, 2012. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to Ken in any way. Also in the room is Milton Gibson, who is our videographer. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and also for Operation Remember Burleson, Texas. And with that little intro, Ken, you can tell us about your time in the U.S. military, sir. Maybe where you grew up and then how you got going.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Pampa, Texas, a little town up northeast of Amarillo. And we had an assembly in high school one day, and the Marine Corps was in there. And I got to looking at them and listening to them, and I decided, man, this sounds like a really good deal. So I joined the Marine Corps Reserve. And after a little summer vacation at Camp Pendleton, I decided that the Marine Corps wasn't my bag. And right after high school graduation, me and this friend of mine joined the Navy. We was going to see the world and do all kinds of things, but that didn't work out either. This boy from the Panhandle, that was too much salt water for him. Yeah. Got out of the Navy and then went to work, couldn't find a good job, worked service stations and everything. Still couldn't find a good job, so got to thinking that Army might be a good deal. So me and my younger brother joined the Army together. Went through Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then he went off to be artilleryman, and I was Ordinance, stationed up at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. And that's where I met my wife. We've been married for 48 years now. Worked out pretty good. And I promised her whenever we got married that I wouldn't stay in the Army. So right after I got out of the Army, I was with the 31st Combat Engineer Battalion down in Fort Bliss. And whenever we got out there, we moved back to Arkansas, and I got a job working for Western Electric Corporation. And minimum wage back then wasn't very much. And she and I sat down one day and talked it all over and decided that I don't need much more time in order to retire from the military, and then I would have to be young enough to get another job. So went back into the Air Force at that time, and then my first daughter was born just about a month or two after I joined the Air Force, and we moved up to Clinton Sherman, Oklahoma, which that base is no longer there. It's a civilian place. And from there, we moved to Goose Bay, Labrador. That's an experience. Whenever it warms up to 0, you let your kids out to play. And we was up there for 2 years, enjoyed it, had a lot of fun up there, riding the snowmobiles and everything, and come back to Seymour Johnson, North Carolina. And from there, I went into munitions. I was a ground service technician there in Seymour Johnson. Well, they decided that they needed munitions people real bad, seeing as how Vietnam was going on, and they sent me to Denver to be a munitions specialist. And from Denver to Vietnam. and loaded a bunch of bombs, 20 millimeter. Just had a lot of fun there in Vietnam dodging. And then after Vietnam, we went back to Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. Can't even remember the name of the base now, but we was there for a year. No, we didn't. I come back to Alexandria, Louisiana from Vietnam, and then went from there to teach at Denver. And I taught munitions at Denver for 2 years, and then they sent me to Thailand. And then I come back to Arizona from there, and then they sent me to Guam for 2 more years. And while I was at Guam, I put in my retirement papers, come back to Carswell Air Force Base, and finished out my retirement there at Carswell. And that's about my history.
You sure got to go to a lot of places.
Mileage counts.
If we go back, sitting in that high school auditorium in Pampa, that Marine came in and dressed blues,
Oh yes.
all spit and polish, all that shiny brass.
Yeah.
You could just picture yourself.
Chest full of medals, yes. Yeah. I can just picture myself up there in that. But then after I'd been in the Marine Corps Reserve for a time, you know, we went to Pendleton, and then I got to see what the Marines really did. And
What did they really do that made you decide that maybe you didn't want to be a Marine?
guard duty and KP whenever we was out there at Pendleton. I got so tired of just standing there watching. It said, is this all there is to the Marines? And I wasn't really happy with them. I respect them highly, but it just was not my bag.
You went for a full summer or just 2 weeks? Or
Just 2 weeks in the summer.
2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So you got out of the Marine Corps, kicked around, couldn't find a good job, went back in the Navy. So what did you do in the Navy? You go to boot camp, first of all?
Yes, sir, I did. Went to San Diego
Okay.
for naval training and everything down there. And a nice tour there. Got out of the basic training, and they stuck me on a ship. You could see from the basic training place. I didn't travel far on that one. And I was there for about 2 years there. Had a good time on that subtender. Learned a lot of things about boat repair and firefighting and damage control and everything. It was a very interesting career. And it was just fun.
You were on a subtender. What's a subtender do, really?
A subtender takes care of submarines. Anything that submarine needs, we do. I've repaired hulls, I've repaired decks, built cabinets in them, and basically just anything they need, we done for them.
Nuclear boats, diesel boats?
Diesel boats. This is
You ever go to sea on one?
never went to sea on a submarine.
You did spend some time inside them, though.
Oh yeah.
Now, for a good West Texas panhandle kind of guy, what do you think about being inside that submarine?
Well, whenever I was first assigned to the Nereus, being a subtender, I thought, man, it'd be neat to be a submariner. But being 6'4", that did not work. I was almost on my hands and knees the whole time I was in there. If you've ever been aboard one, you know that the hatches are real small and you don't move around real fast in there when you're tall.
Was there any place on that boat that you could stand up?
Yeah, it was in the Combat Command Center, where the periscopes were. Stand up in there and not bounce off anything.
But if you were in, say, one of the cruise spaces, how high was the overhead in a?
It was about that high.
Do you have some marks there on your forehead to prove that?
Oh yes, I've got all kinds of scars across there.
Okay.
And it was the same way on that tender in most of the shops. The ceilings were very low. But it's a different world in the Navy now.
You spent 2 years active in the Navy?
4 years active in the Navy.
4.
Mm-hmm.
So half of the time was on a tender,
Mm-hmm.
and the other half you spent.
On a ARD 29. That's a floating dry dock. And we docked LSTs, destroyers, had a submarine. We'd do hull repair and everything on it, and then flood the dock, send it back out to sea. And my job there was docking. I had to set up the dock basin to have all the blocks and shoring material and everything in place whenever we docked it, so that it didn't fall over when we pumped the water out.
So they would give you dimensions on whatever ship you had coming,
Mm-hmm.
and then you had to take the cribbing or
Yeah, the cribbing. It basically, they had big blocks, 6 feet tall, 5 feet wide, 5 feet across. And you would have to set the blocks along the keel, but you had to be careful of the sonar domes and the screws and everything else to make sure you don't crush $10,000 to $20,000 worth of equipment. It was my job to get the blueprints for that particular ship with all the modifications that had been made to it, and arrange the dock basin in that order to assure that whenever we docked it, we didn't create more damage than what was there.
you lived on the beach, I guess, in Guam?
No, I lived in a little old barge that was tied up next to the dry dock.
Were you married when you were in the Navy?
No,
No, okay, that was
wasn't.
before. But you were on a barge?
yeah, just
How
like a
big?
little barge you see going up and down the rivers out there.
How many guys were on that barge?
There's 5 of us. Now that dock basin is built where it does have crew quarters and everything in the hulls of that dry dock. So all of us basically lived aboard ship except the ones that are married.
Okay. This barge that you were living on, did you have mess quarters and the whole 9 yards, or?
No, it was just a sleeping quarters and a work quarter. We had all of our saws and equipment that we used to make the stuff with, you know, the shores and everything on the barge. And the dry dock itself had the messing and berthing facilities for all the rest of the people.
You were in those conditions for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what'd you do for recreation, like weekends or when you had leave?
Well, the only time I had leave is whenever I came home to bury my father. And recreation was swimming and drinking, just running around having a good time.
So
Just a lot of
there
horseshoes.
was an EM club or an NCO club, I guess, that.
There was, but I didn't go there.
Okay.
Yeah. I drank very, very little at that time.
Play softball or something like that, maybe, Ken?
Softball, football, volleyball. Had a lot of sports activities over there. Because we was always in competition with the Air Force Base and
Okay.
the Marines that was there.
You see some good ball players?
Yes, sir, I seen some pretty good ones there. I sure did.
So it sounds like you you enjoyed your time in the Navy.
I did.
How come you got out?
I really don't know. It just,
Enlistment was up and
enlistment was up, and I don't know, just seemed like the thing to do, get out.
you would have been, how old were you? 20, early 20s, I guess?
22.
22?
Mhm.
Thought the big world out there, there must have been something better to do, huh?
Yeah. Like I said, there was a lot of salt water out there under this boy from the Panhandle of Texas that wasn't used to water. But it was a lot of fun, really.
You get out of the Navy, and here you couldn't find a job that satisfied you, so you went back in the Army, right?
Yeah, my younger brother and I joined the Army together.
Fort Chaffee, and you were involved in Ordinance. Talk to us about the Ordinance. That sounds like a dangerous job.
It was. It's handling ammo for all the artillery and EOD and all them people. We kept track of their ordinances for them and issued them.
You ever see any premature explosion, or what was the most hair-raising thing you were ever involved in with that ordinance?
With that ordinance, well, the most hair-raising thing I come across there in that ordinance thing was whenever this colonel, I'm not going to specify names or nothing, but he was artillery and he wanted a field trailer built. You know, something where he could be comfortable whenever he had his artillery unit in the field. Well, we took a deuce-and-a-half trailer and we built him a mobile home on it. Come to find out, it wasn't authorized. And then when they started questioning me, I just, hey, he told me to do it, I did it. But I thought, you're going to court-martial me over that. But that's the most hair-raising thing that happened there in the first ordinance.
How big a shell did you work with?
It was 12 by 8, 12 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 8 feet tall. We built a desk, put a water tank in it so he could shower, commode, bed, desk, indirect lighting, and mounted an air conditioner on the side.
So you had a lot of talent other than just working with Ordnance.
Well, I guess I'm just kind of a jack of all trades.
Okay.
I piddle with everything.
Go back and my question, you worked on like 50 caliber bullets up to how big, 155 millimeter?
Yeah. Anything that made a pop or a bang, we stored it, took care of it for them, and made sure that it was all operational.
On something as big as 155 millimeter, which is, what is that, 5 inches, something like that?
Yeah.
Is that all a solid cartridge?
No. There's 2 cartridges.
Okay.
You got a projectile and then a powder charge.
Okay. So when that guy fires that, he puts the projectile in
Yeah.
and
Pushes it up, and then
Okay.
loads the powder charge behind it, slams the door. And believe it or not, you do jerk the lanyard and it fires it off.
I guess the lanyard is just like on a
The lanyard has a small, it is connected to a small primer. It's got Petton, most
Okay.
generally Petton or RDX in there, like a cap for your shotgun shells.
Right.
It goes in there and hits that, causes a spark, which lights off the powder.
Okay. While you were up at Fort Chaffee, you met your wife.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you meet her?
Through a mutual friend. I knew this young lady, and we just pulled into the little drive-in restaurant up there at the same time. She introduced us, and history since then. Just a little whirlwind romance. It's lasted a long time.
So you were married, you were 25, 26?
I was 24 and turned 25 just shortly after that.
Okay. Did she get to go to most of the duty stations after that, Ken?
The only place she didn't go with me is whenever I went to Thailand or Vietnam. She went to Guam with me, she went to Labrador with me. Every place I went, she went with me. And she misses the military too.
She misses it now?
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh, okay.
She'd go back to it in a heartbeat. She loves to travel.
You said you spent, when you went in the Air Force, when you decided that you only had X number of years to go, so hey, why don't we get back in the military? So you chose the Air Force. Why choose the Air Force? You'd already tried the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Army. You didn't dislike the Army or the Navy.
Well, whenever I got to thinking about it, you know, I knew that if I went back in the Navy, I'd be at sea a lot. I wanted to be with my family. The Air Force, the ground base, you don't rotate in and out a lot, which I found out that wasn't true either. But I knew the Air Force had a lot of good career fields in it. And we decided that we'd go in there. And needless to say, I didn't get the career field that whenever I retired from the military, that American Airlines didn't have much use for munitions specialist. So I had to retrain and become a general machinist whenever I get out of the military.
GI Bill do that for you?
Yes, sir. I went to TCJC and learned the machine shop trade. Got hired on out here in Kennedale as a general machinist at Harris Graphics at the time. Right, located over there on Dick Price Road.
Mm-hmm.
Worked in the machine shop there for 24 years, 25 years, something like that.
It's good that
Retired
Uncle
from there.
Sam paid for some training for you when you got out.
It did. 'Cause whenever I first got out, me and my older brother, we went into subcontracting construction, you know, doing framing and drywall and everything, and it got so bad that there was so much competition out there that nobody wanted to pay what you had to live on.
We go back to, you get married, get out of the Army, go to the Air Force, you go to Goose Bay. How long was the summer in Goose Bay?
About 3 months. That was fall, spring, and summer.
Middle of the summer, what time did it get daylight?
In the middle of the summer, it gets daylight around 1 o'clock in the morning,
Then it gets dark.
about 11:30.
So you really only got like 2 hours when it's dark?
Mm-hmm.
Of course,
And
then
that's
when you go to December,
It's just the opposite. In the wintertime, you know, I had no problem with putting my daughter to sleep, because if it's dark out, it's time to go to sleep. In the summertime, had a problem. Because as the sun's shining, she's playing. So you had to improvise and darken the windows in her bedroom, make her think it's nighttime.
what was your job with the Air Force when you were at Goose Bay?
At Goose Bay, I was dispatcher for the motor pool and driver training instructor. Yeah.
So you were not involved in ordnance there,
I
though?
wasn't involved in ordnance there.
Okay.
I didn't get into ordnance until I got to Denver the first time.
And the family liked Goose Bay.
Oh, they had a blast up there. They really did. It, like I say, a lot of fun in the snow. And of course, we had all the movie theaters and bowling alleys and everything up on the base, and all the clubs and NCO club and everything that we went to. And it was entertaining.
Okay. Came back to Seymour Johnson in North Carolina. Then they send you to Denver to become a munitions specialist.
Yes, sir.
Was that about the same as being an ordnance man in the Army?
Only in more depth. Because not only did we handle the small arms and everything, we also handled and moved and assembled and delivered everything from a 22 round to a nuclear weapon.
You work with nuclear stuff?
Yes, we had nuclear weapons out here at Carswell even.
That require a pretty high security clearance?
Top secret. And it's interesting.
Did you have any fear, or were there any extra precautions you took when you were working with those nuclear things?
Nuclear weapons are basically just high explosive. It's a triggering devices that makes it nuclear, and the filler in it. But most of your most hazardous stuff are your common munitions, like your flares, your 20 millimeter, and stuff like that that are electrically fired. Because just rubbing the hair on your arm can set off a round of 20 millimeter. Because it is electrically primed and it doesn't take much to fire it off.
Static electricity?
Mm-hmm. There's been a couple of aircraft burnt down because of static electricity.
Somewhere in this Air Force hitch, you went to Thailand, and that was when the war in Vietnam was going on, I guess.
Yes, I'd been in Thailand, just right after, about a year or so after I got back from Vietnam. The war in Vietnam was still going on. We still had MACB.
Well,
and
about Vietnam, then the family stayed here in the States.
yeah, she moved back to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and stayed there whenever I went over there.
And you were on an Air Force base, I guess, in Vietnam?
Vietnam, yes, sir.
So you lived in the barracks?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We
Have sandbags around the barracks?
sandbags, sandbag bunkers. We had them there.
Did you ever have to run into those bunkers?
Yep. We would get more in Vietnam. We would get mortar rounds 2 or 3, 4 times a day. It'd be a attack of mortars, rockets, whatever they could get their hands on, and shooters at us.
So you'd be at your job in a shop like?
Kind of like of an assembly plant. We would go to the bomb dump, which now, when we say bomb dump, we're talking 600,000-700,000 tons of munitions stored out there. And we would have to take all the different components and assemble them to make a bomb. To make a bomb, you need your bomb casing, you need your nose fuse, your tail fin, and your vane for it, plus your arming wires. And then you load them on a 40-foot trailer and deliver them to the flight line. And at the flight line, you take them off the trailer, set them on blocks, and they put them on the airplane.
Where do you put all the components together? You do that out by the bunker somewhere, or when you get to the airplane?
We would line them up on racks, be 30, 40 feet long. We'd put the nose and tail fuses in them, put the fins on them, put the tail assembly on them right there, and then pick them up and set them on the trailer.
I guess this was in some area that the
Yes.
mortars couldn't get to you?
You're just out in the open.
You get mortar attacks when you were putting these things together?
Yeah. In the bomb dump, we have what they call a revetment. You know what a revetment is?
Tell us.
It's basically a earthen berm that's about 8-10 feet tall. It goes up in a pyramid type shape. And if we start getting rounds coming in, rockets, mortars, whatever, we get on the other side of that berm from where the munitions are. And then if something does happen in there, the munitions go up instead of sideways, and pretty safe over there.
So how long did you do this job?
Now, I was in the what we call the line delivery portion of it. We would pick up the assembled bombs in the bomb dump and transport them to the flight line. And it went around the perimeter of the base there at Van Ryn. And quite a few times you get to the flight line and discover that you had to go back and pick up more napalm bombs because the ones you delivered had holes in them. It was a sniper fire coming around through the fence, hitting the bombs.
Wow.
But that was just the napalm. The steel bombs, it'd take more than a rifle shell to fire one of them off.
You were putting these bombs on F-105s, I guess, mostly?
F-4s, 105s. Then we had the C-117s that had the miniguns on them. C-47s had the miniguns. Now the C-17s had the miniguns and the 20mm cannons.
C-17 is a big airplane, isn't it?
Kind of like a little flying boxcar.
Okay.
Got the wings, and then you got fuselage here, and then the pilot, kind of like the old P-38,
Okay.
only bigger. And they would have 4 miniguns and 4 20mm cannons hanging out the side of that thing.
When you were in the Air Force, did you ever get to fly much? They took you over in an Air Force plane, they brought you back in an Air Force plane, and that was about it?
That was it.
Okay. You were in all 4 branches. Are there any people that you remember specifically from any of those branches, outstanding, maybe a Navy chief or sergeant, maybe an
Yeah.
officer in the Army or Air Force somewhere? Any ones that really stand out to you?
Well, the closest friend I got from any of them was a guy by the name of Philip Beard. He's from Alexandria, Louisiana, and he was the best man at my wedding. And he's an engineer over there in Alexandria, Louisiana now. And we lost track of him whenever I got out of the Army, and just 2 years ago, reestablished contact with him. So we've been having some good conversations back and forth across the state here.
I would say, Ken, Milton and I have talked to a number of veterans. You seem to have enjoyed it, and you certainly had a very well-rounded career. You got to go to a lot of places under a lot of different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
No regrets?
None whatsoever.
You have one daughter,
I've got 2 daughters and 1 son.
son military-minded, or?
No, sir, he's going to school right now to become a teacher.
Okay.
And he was born with blind in one eye. But they didn't take him into the military. He wasn't too interested in it because he couldn't see good.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a good man.
Well, I've enjoyed your story, sir. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to come see us this morning. We appreciate your time in the military protecting us.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, 'cause I did. Had a good time,
Good.
and I was proud to serve too, still am.
That's a good way to end. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.